Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Link Kollel's Yeshiva for Half a Day Legal Holiday Program. We decided to focus on a topic today that is very relevant. As you will see, it's things that we should never know about, but it happens all too often. And being that we feel in the air already the difference ben Yisrael Amim, especially on a day like today, we'll see that it's especially true regarding this subject. There's a huge difference in how a Torah-fearing Jews relate to this topic, and how the Umas Ha'olam, and it's rapidly declining, how they are misyachas to this topic. There are going to be terms that we're going to be using that I don't know if everybody is so familiar with, so I asked Dr. Zaghi to give a short introduction on what we are going to be speaking about. I'm going to be speaking about the halachic part, which is good for you guys because it's better that I don't speak about anything to do with refuah. But Dr. Zaghi is going to speak about some of the terms that I'm going to be speaking about. So go ahead, Dr. Zaghi. Thank you for...
Important terms to understand. One is called DNR, which stands for do not resuscitate. That means if a patient either collapses in the field or in the hospital, they lose the pulse, no CPR, no compressions. Another term is called DNI, which means do not intubate. The patient loses their airway, no intubation, no attachment to a breathing machine. So reasons that patients choose these options is like either they're terminally ill, they're very old, that even if they weren't to have CPR, they probably wouldn't survive it, or they would have a really bad outcome post CPR intubation, and that's why they choose to totally avoid being in that situation. Another concept is called comfort care, which is getting more and more common in the hospitals, which means a terminally ill patient, they focus completely on quality of life and relieving symptoms. They stop antibiotics, they stop non-essential medications, and just giving pain meds, other meds to relieve symptoms. Another concept is called palliative care, which sounds like a very nice word. They define it now as an approach that improves quality of life of patients and their families facing problems associated with life-threatening illnesses. The problem in palliative care is that the focus becomes so much on quality of life that sometimes they do certain things that might shorten a patient's life and cause death. So that's kind of a really important concept. And I think we'll... Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the following. Let me give you a little bit of an akdama. Rav Moshe Feinstein writes in his sefer on Chumash, Drash Moshe, he writes about, I'll read you the lashon over here. It's written in the pasuk regarding Ari Miklat, Ki Adam hu yachnif es haaretz, that blood could sometimes flatter the earth. What's pshat? Blood could flatter the earth. Says Rav Moshe that there's a very big difference between Umas Ha'olam, how they're makpid on murder is very different to how we are makpid on murder. By Umas Ha'olam, by the Goyim, their Iker Kpeda is that there should be a proper Yishuv Ha'olam. There should be a good, well-functioning civilization. And that well-functioning civilization is as long as a person benefits society and he's benefiting ha'aretz, then any justification is okay. And that's why there are many wars, says Rav Moshe, and people die in many wars, but they don't have a problem with that. Because as long as it fits into their philosophy that it's good for Yishuv Ha'olam, so that's fine. Mashe ein kein bayas. Everything is totally, he says, bechashivus ha'adam, by the importance of man. And by the importance of man, it doesn't matter if it's good for the land serves us. So sometimes the pasuk is telling us that the blood, dam yach nifis haaretz, that people are serving the land and seeing what's good for Yishuv Ha'olam. And by us, it doesn't work that way. By us, we look at every single minute in a person's life for himself. a person is a binyan, an olam shalem. That's what matters. Okay, with that akdama, I'm going to start speaking about these terms that Dr. Zaghi pointed out, which is DNR, DNI, and interesting, it always happens whenever you're being Isaac in an Indian, Hashem sends you these cases. The truth is, for the past couple of months, I've been hearing more and more from doctors, cases that they have that they've been telling me that patients have been intubated and the family decided to remove intubation even though that they knew, or sometimes a feeding tube, and they knew that the elderly patient wasn't going to be able to eat. And basically, they told me they witnessed firsthand how children starved their parents to death. Literally, children starved their parents to death. And many of the hospital staff are encouraging of that. They're saying, well, they don't have such a good quality of life. Good quality of life means also that it's costing them a lot in medical bills, that the insurance always caps it to a certain degree, so it's not good for them either. And that could also explain what the quality of life is. And eventually it becomes so bad that the children feel a lot of pressure, so they say, well, they're suffering. So the importance that we're going to have to see today in certain halachic sources is how much does a person have a right to intervene and be makatzer a person's life, and to shorten a person's life, if at all there is such a concept. And I'll tell you, just yesterday, as I was finishing this year, I was on my way home to light with my family, Hadlakas Neiris, and I get a phone call from a doctor, and he's telling me that he works in a hospital, that there's an elderly patient who's a Holocaust survivor. She's a Holocaust survivor. She's in her 90s. She has a cancer in the stomach, and they put in a feeding tube. And the reason why they put in a feeding tube was because she always told her son that nobody should ever be denied food because of what she suffered through the Holocaust. So she had a feeding tube, but it was irritating. She pulled it out. So they brought her into the hospital. She was breathing heavily. And I don't even think she was conscious. She was breathing heavily, which was a sign that she was struggling. She was going through yisurin. So the family wasn't sure. They were being told that maybe she should be going on morphine, and giving her morphine is going to calm down the breathing, but it's eventually also going to facilitate her death. Because she's going through yisurin and they're giving morphine. The side effects is that she's not necessarily going to be able to breathe as well. So this doctor wanted to know, is he allowed to administer the morphine because it's helping her die? That's a shaila. And that's a shaila. Maybe at the end of this year we'll discuss what the answer to that is. It's really going to depend on the situation and how much morphine. But what's important to know is that, I'm going to start with this. There's an organization in America called Chaim Aruchim. Chaim Aruchim is run by the Agudas Yisrael. The number you could get easily, I think it's like 718 Chaim Aruchim even. It's an organization that helps families deal with end-of-life issues that are the people are under pressure. And I spoke to the posek of one of the poskim of Chaim Aruchim that answers these questions. His name is Rabbi Gwartzman. He told me, first of all, two things that have to be mentioned before we start. Number one is that, as we're going to see, everything is a shayla. Everything is a halachic question, and it all depends on the details of that situation. So everything that we're going to speak about now is theoretic. Don't apply it at home. If you chas v'shalom have a shayla, there's a phone number to call. Everything is a shayla. And number two, sometimes a person could be in a situation where he doesn't know what to do. Something happened to the patient. So he wants to know, does he act, does he not act, does he resuscitate, does he not resuscitate? If you don't know, the assumption should be act. Do whatever you can to save the person, and then you'll find out what has to be done. But number one is you act. So those are two important principles that are important to speak about. Now let's get into the halacha l'maaseh. There is, in this sugya, a very important question, and it's a contradiction between two sources. And the way how we're going to explain and be miyashiv the contradiction is going to clarify for us what is allowed in signing a DNR. Is signing a DNR or a DNI or an AND ever allowed? And we'll explain these terms, and we'll explain exactly what a person is able to do. So the first source is a Gemara in Maseches Yuma that were given out in the source sheets, which is a person is found under an avalanche, and there's rocks on top of him, and you find that person that he's in a state that he's half dead. He's a goisis. So the Gemara says that you're able suffik chai suffik meis mepachin olav esagal. You're allowed to be mechal Shabbos even in Isser Deraisa to save him, even though there might be shilas of Yisur Deraisa. Whatever you can do, you're allowed to save that person. The Shulchan Aruch in Orach Chaim Siman Shin Chav Tes Siv Gimel Dalet and Hey discusses to what point you do that. It says like this: Misha Nafla of Mapoilis Sufik Chai Sufik Meis Sufik Husham Sufik Ein Husham. You don't even know if he's there. You're allowed to remove the rocks, even though there are many different sfekis, doubts that person might be alive. You still do that. That's Sif Gimel. Sif Dalet. Afilu matzo merutzitz. Even if you found that his skull is crushed, she'enoi yachol lichyos ela lefi sha'a, that he could only live temporarily. He's called a chaye sha'a. Chaye sha'a is he can only live temporarily. Mepakhin ubaykin ad choitmai. We still are mechal Shabbos, and we see if he has life in him up to his nostrils. Im loy hergishu bechutmai chiyus as vaday meis. If you don't see any breath of life, that means he's vaday dead. Loishna pagabroshay, loishna loy. But what does it say? It says that if a person is a temporary chaye sha'a, mepakhin olav esagal, you are mechal Shabbos. What does it say here? That even if a person that you know is not going to live, presumably he's dying, you still do whatever you can to save his life. So far, so good. That's what's written in Hilchas Shabbos. If you turn to the Ramah in Yoredeya, the second source, Siman Shin Lamed Tes Sif Aleph, and the basis of this Ramah is a Shilte Giborim, one of the commentators on the Rif in Maseches Moed Katan. And this is Hagoyis Alfasi, it's called. And he says the following. The Ramah says that you don't dig a caver by somebody who's at home dying. Say, oh, by the way, we're just preparing things for you. It's gonna distract him. He thinks right now they're thinking about my death. He's going to give up. He's just gonna die. So you don't do that ad sheyamos. And on you should never open up a kever that it should be opened up till the next day. And not only that, Rabbi Yehuda Chassid says there's a sakana b'davar. Not only that, you're not allowed to cause for a person to die quickly. Kegoin, like mishu geisis zman araych v'lo yachol liparei. It's very important that if somebody is a geisis for a while and he can't really separate himself from dying. Aser lihishamit akar ve'akeses mitachtav. You can't remove a pillow from under him. Now, not only that, because some people say that the feathers of the chicken that are under are going to cause the person, if you remove them, they're going to cause the person to die quicker. I don't know, the Levush says that the Ramah had some type of tradition that way. You can't put keys under a person's pillow. A person feels that maybe that there's a segula that they put keys under the pillow that the guy's going to die quicker. You're not allowed to do anything of the sort. However, what are you allowed to do? This is very important. If something is causing that the nefashama doesn't want to leave. Let's say you have a person who's a lumberjack, who's cutting wood. Or if a person has melach al lishoin, if somebody has salt on his tongue, which is very difficult to understand why that's considered so much better than removing the pillow. But That's what the Ramah says. Ve'elu ma'atu mitzias nefesh, and they're causing that a person who's dying cannot die. Then you're obligated to tell that lumberjack to be quiet and stop chopping wood, because the noise of the chopping wood is distracting the mace from being able to die peacefully. It's not letting his neshama leave. And therefore, mutter lasira. We're going to see the sources say that not only that, you should. The ein bazeh maise klal ela shemeser hamoneya. It's not that considering you're doing an action, rather you're removing a moneya for it to happen. That's what the Ramah says. So let me ask you a question. This seems to be a blatant contradiction to the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Shin Chavtes Siv Gimel. In Shulchan Aruch Siman Shin Chavtes Siv Gimel, it says the guy is dying, you have to save his life. And over here, not only you're not saving his life, you're facilitating for him to die. How does that go together? This is one of the I would say one of the classic stiras that whoever is being Isaac in this subject has to have a proper yishuv, because how you're going to answer this yishuv is going to make a world of difference on what's able to be signed, what's not able to be signed, what's able to be done, what's not able to be done, respirators, ECMO machines, etc. Let's start. There's a Shayil Teshuvah's Beis Yaakov. The Beis Yaakov says that he's brought down in the Pischei Tshuva in the Shulchan Aruch Yoredeya Siman Shin Lametes. He says that we're talking about in Hilchas Shabbos about somebody who's dying, but he might not die. He might not die. And since he might not die, so you are able to save him. If you know, though, that he's vadai going to die, then you're able to facilitate his death. So the Beis Yaakov says. The Shvus Yaakov brings this Beis Yaakov down. He says he doesn't agree. And not only that, the Bir Halacha in Siman Shin Chavtes, which we quoted in the sources, I think source number 3, it speaks about at length what happens if a guy says, for sure is going to die. And this is a fundamental question. A person that 100% they're dying. Their organs have failed. There is no hope for them to keep on living. Are you allowed to be Machal Shabbos to save their life? And this is also a very important theological question, because if you have to save their life, obviously there's a very important meaning to their life. That even if they're going to die in a day, and this is going to be a very big conflict between us and the Goyim. The Bir Halacha in Dibra Maschil Ela Lefisha brings a few reasons why Pikuach Nefesh is Daiche Kol HaMitzvahs, why Pikuach Nefesh is Daiche all of the mitzvahs. But the classic pasuk that we all say is V'chai Behem. V'chai Behem, you should live by them. V'chai Behem means even if it's temporary life, you are living. And who knows the amount of mitzvahs that you could be makayim. Maybe that person, one more Shabbos that they had to go through, one more minute of Yisurin that they had to go through, is their ticket to Olam Haba. Nobody knows. The Chai Bohem tells you that even Chai Yishar, you're Machal Shabbos. There is one opinion in the Gemara that says that the reason why we're able to be Machal Shabbos to save a life is because you should be Machal one Shabbos so that he could keep many Shabbosim. And the ramification, the Pri Megadim says, is that let's say you have an uber, a fetus, who is at the beginning stages and not necessarily considered a life, but they are going to be Shomer Shabbos later on. So maybe you don't have V'chai Bahem, but you have Shishmor Shabbos as Harbe. So, Lahalacha, we follow both reasons, L'chumra, and the Bir Halacha says that the reason of V'chai Bahem tells you that a person's a Chai Yishah, and you know that he's not going to live more than a day, you are still Mechal Shabbos. And even if Nisratzit's Roisha, he brings Taisus and Maseches Nida, that Mem Dalan Beis, that is mashma not that way. And Taisus Maseches Nida says that the reason why we're Mechal Shabbos for a person who's terminally ill is because Roiv, even though Roiv Gaisasim Lamisa, even though most people who are deathly ill, they die, but you might have a minority, a miut that lives, and since you're chayshish for the miut over here as well, we will say that we that we are able to be Machal Shabbos. And according to this, if you know 100% he's going to die, you shouldn't be Machal Shabbos. But the Bir Halacha says, nevertheless, he has another shot in Taisus, so I'm not going to get into. He says the Pais can say that even if you know 100% the person is going to die, you save his life. So if that's the case, you know that the person's dying by the case of the Ramah, that the lumberjack is outside. You're supposed to save his life. You're not supposed to facilitate him dying. So the Beis Yaakov says we're not talking about a real geisis. Doesn't seem to be that way. The Bir Halacha says even he's a vadai geisis. He proves from the Gemara, not the Shulchan Aruch Harav. In Shin Chav Tes says even if you know it's a chayesha and he's going to die. And that's the Shulchan Aruch's lashon also. That you know that he's going to die, you still save a life. So the Beis Yaakov is not accepted le'alacha.
What's the time horizon that's called chayesha?
What?
What's the time horizon that's called chayesha?
It's not written. It's not written. It's not clear what a chayesha. It's not good. What's a geisis? What's a geisis? So Professor Abraham from the Nishmas Avram, he asked Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, what's a geisis? So Reb Shlomo Zalman answered the typical way any Jew would answer. He asked Professor Abraham, "You're the doctor. You tell me what a geisis is." That's what it is. A doctor tells you when a person's dying. A geisis means a person's dying, and that's what a geisis is. Chayesh Shah is somebody who's not going to live a long time. It's not doesn't mean 6 months. It means even eminent. Yeah, Chayesha is different. But I'm telling Geises, there's not a Hagdara. I was bringing an example from Geises. Chayesha is not clear, at least in the Rishonim, what it could be. So that's why nowadays it's different. Let's say a doctor knows. It's different. That's what Shlomo Zalman said. It's up to that's a Chachma Saroifim. Or Hashem, we have doctors over here, so I'm not going to attempt to get into what Geises is. But the Beis Yaakov was not accepted. So Rav Vosner says, maybe another suggestion how you could be miyashiv, why a geisis is you're able to remove any restrictions of him dying, and you're allowed to be Michal Shabbos, is like what you were trying to say, that you have a permission to save a geisis. You're not obligated to save a geisis. You have a permission to save a geisis. But on the other hand, if he's dying and it's hard for him to die, you're allowed to remove any restrictions that you can. So it's not such a pasha to answer. It's not mashma that way. If you have to save a person, you should have to save him. Where did we ever find that you have a permission? Yachayil, if you want to, you could save him. This is a stira that, as Rav Gortz was telling me yesterday, if you ever find a very big paisik at a chasna, and you want to discuss with them a very juicy halacha, you ask them how to be miyashav the stira between Siman Shin Chav Tes and Yoredeya Siman Shin Lamed Tes. How are you miyashav the stira? Well, within the Ramah Gufa, he says a chilik, and he said that if it's Meser Amoneya, that you're not doing any action of kum v'aseh, of letting him die, you're just removing any barriers from him dying, then you're allowed to do. Fine. So you're allowed to do that, but then when you find him dying, you have to save him at the same time? How does that jive? How does that go together? So that's a question that the Taz says he doesn't understand the Ramah, why you're allowed to remove the salt from his mouth and you can't remove the pillow. So the Taz argues on the Ramah. But it seems to be that the Levush says, that Levush, the Talmud of the Ramah, says that obviously they had a tradition that removing a car is more of a direct action. It's more of a direct action. It's hard to understand. As I said at the beginning, it's hard to understand this Ramah. But Right. That's what we're gonna go into now. Rabbi Brandon's making sure that I'm on time. We have till 11:15. Okay, I'm good. So let's explain how we can be miyashiv the steer of the Ramah. And this is the way that the Poskim Al Kol Panim in the Agudas Yisrael go with this mahalach. And this yishuv really clarifies many things, and it'll help us understand what to do, practically speaking, halacha l'maisa, which of course, I'm not saying any halacha l'maisa, but at least we'll know where to ask halacha l'maisa, which is the following. The Shvus Yaakov says he had a horrible case about a woman whose head was decapitated and she was pregnant. It's in the 1600s. So they went and they were machal Shabbos, that they cut open her stomach and they saved the baby, and they were asked whether it was okay to save the baby because maybe he's maybe you shouldn't be allowed because he's an Uber, and he says no such thing. Of course you're allowed, and it's a big mitzvah what he did. Not only that, says that he explains that a goisis, except because on the other hand you're not allowed to touch a goisis if she was in the middle of dying. I don't exactly know the situation how it happened, but he writes that although a goisis is dying, but if you're able to be Meisir the goisis, the gesisa lefi sha'ah. Listen to the words over here. You're able to temporarily remove the gesisa. You're able to temporarily remove the fact that this person is dying. You're able to do that. In Siman Shin Chav Tes in Orach Chaim, when there was an avalanche and the person was under a rock and the rock was crushing him, you're allowed to be Machal Shabbos to remove that rock, even though that person might succumb to the blows that he got, and he's never going to be able to recover. Right now he's dying, and you're able to get that thing that's making him die, remove it, and save him. You're being Isaac and Refuah. Of course you're allowed. Masha'enkein and Shinlam Mites, the person is dying. By you removing the lumberjack's noise, you're helping him die. And if you take away the pillow, what's happening is that you are causing him to die. That's a prohibition. Causing a person to die is forbidden. If you are being Isaac in helping him live a little longer, you have to do that. Masha'enkin, if a person's dying anyways, and you're being Isaac and just helping him die easier, that would be okay. For example, let's say you had a cancer patient, a lung cancer patient, that is going to die in 2 months. The doctors say that's it. The cancer ravaged his body. He's going to die in 2 months. Right now he has an infection. You can help him get over the infection. Of course you're mechuyev to help him get over the infection. Because right now he has an infection that you could help him, you could heal him, and they'll live for 2 more months. Or they'll live for 1 more month. Doesn't matter how long they're going to live. But what you're being Isaac in right now is not what they're dying and you're helping them die. You're helping them live. Masha'enkein, if a person right now is in the middle of dying and you want to resuscitate him over and over and over again, despite the fact that it's just that he's in the middle of dying and you're shocking him again and you're shocking him again, that's not so pashut. That could be that's allowed. So Moshe Feinstein, yes?
Categorizing between 2 categories of internal and external. That seems like the lumberjack.
No.
He's an external, but it's an internal.
Right, but I'm talking about that. Even if it's going to be more of you have to be Meser Monea regarding the avalanche. Let's say right now you're just taking away the rock. So who says? In other words, you're not doing anything by just taking away the rock, but you're mechuyev to do that. So why don't you say, I'll just leave him alone, I'm not doing anything? You're obligated b'kum v'aseh to do something to save his life. B'kum v'aseh you're obligated to do to save his life. So you could just say, I'm masir the maneh, I'm not going to do anything. So why should you, if that's the chilek, you should just say, well, I'm not going to be Isaac at all in healing him. You're not allowed to do that. You have to help and save him. So let's talk about, first of all, let's start with DNRs and DNIs. DNRs, yeah. So the clear distinction between Yoredeya, that you are allowed to facilitate a person to die, and Orach Chaim, where you have to help a person live even though he's going to die imminently, is that in Orach Chaim, what you're doing is that right now, you will give him a little bit more life. By removing the rock, you will give him a little bit more life. You're right, he might die soon, but right now, you're giving him more life. Whereas in Yoredeya, what you're doing is, he's dying right now. You're not going to give him more life from what you're doing. He's on the decline. He's in the middle of dying. You don't have an obligation to save him in that instance. You don't have an obligation to save him because he's in the middle of dying. Help him live. Ad kedei kach, that the Tzitz Eliezer, we don't paskin this way, but the Tzitz Eliezer in Chelik Tes, Siman Pei Tes, says that based on this Ramah, if a person is on a respirator, I'm very careful what I'm saying because the minig is not like the Tzitz Eliezer, but I just want to bring a dimyan to understand how he applied this Ramah. He said that if a person's on a respirator, and I'm not going to get into the medicine, I'm not getting into the subject at all. But the person, he said, this is what he says. He says the person is dead. The person is his brain is dead, and the only reason why he is alive right now is because the respirator is breathing air into his lungs. The respirator is breathing air into his lungs. Eliezer says that not only would you be allowed to remove the respirator because he's in the middle of dying and you're not doing anything, you might be obligated to remove it. So I was saying you might be obligated to remove it because the Ramah says you're supposed to help a person. You're not supposed to make it more difficult for the person to die. And if they put on the respirator, you should have to remove it. Rav Moshe Feinstein in Igros Moshe, that same tshuva a little later on, I don't have it quoted, he says that if the respirator is on, you're not allowed to remove it because the person might be still living. If the oxygen ran out and the person is clinically dead, it could be you don't have an obligation to replenish the oxygen. What?
It's not legit.
Because there's no tanks. So, right. So, but that's what Rav Moshe says, and Lamaise, what I spoke to the Paiskim in America, that nobody follows this Eliezer. Nobody allows the removal of machines, and I think the reason is that we are not clear what type of life there is this person right now. I tell you, I was involved in a case in Canada where a good friend of mine's son, suffered an asthma attack, and he was without oxygen for 45 minutes, and he went into a coma, and he was legally brain dead. And in Canada, they put huge pressure, and they just passed a law that the doctors should have a right to decide to pull the plug. And literally the whole community in Toronto went down to the court to advocate on his behalf, and he lived another 4 months on this machine until he passed away. Now, Dr. Zaghi tells me the only reason why they should pass away is because of other complications like urinary infections or pneumonia or the like. But they're not gonna. In other words, a person could live for much longer with that machine. I'd like to know why is it that at one point they can't live on the machine. I mean, Dr. Zaghi says it's only because of other complications. I want to look into that more, but of course I'm going into a realm that's not mine. So it's puzzling to me. It's puzzling to me, but that's what happens. That people are on respirators for a long time, and the heroes, you cannot remove a respirator. But I'm just saying that the Tzitz Eliezer wants to suggest from this Ramah that if a person's on a respirator, and there's nothing else going on in his body, he's totally dead. So you're just being ma'akiv the neshama from totally leaving.
What does dead mean though? What does dead mean?
So that's the subject that we would need another 3 hours to get into. That's why I'm not getting into it right now. I just wanted to bring this Tzitz Eliezer for a dogma how he applies the Ramah Halacha L'Maisa. So getting back to do not resuscitate, do not intubate. There are patients that want to sign an order that do not resuscitate me, which means, let's say they have a heart attack, God forbid, and you have to resuscitate them. So you're going to say, well, the person is dead now. Why do you have to do anything? There's a hasara samonea. So here there's a clear halacha in Choshen Mishpat, which we all know, which is leisamoid al dam re'echa. You see your friend drowning, you know that you could save him right now. You have to save him. You have to resuscitate him. You have to do whatever you can to save him. If a person doesn't want to be intubated for the same reason, because they're going to say that the quality of life is not going to be the same, you have to help them live. You have to help them live. The question is going to be where it's eventually going to be a stage where the person is terminally ill and they're dying. And here it's going to really matter how we explained the Ramah and the Shulchan Aruch on what the distinction is. If a person is in the process of dying and you could keep on resuscitating them, but what's going to happen if you keep on resuscitating them? They're just gonna come back and die again. Then it could be there's room to talk about DNRs. It's a very specific case. Now there's something else called, as we mentioned, the ANR, which is allowing natural death, which is basically, it's not only do not resuscitate, but it's let them die comfortably. That means you remove medications, you don't medicate them, you don't give them antibiotics, you let them die comfortably. That's not allowed. And that the poskim will never be matir, because that's just speeding up their death by causing them to die more, by not giving them antibiotics and things that should help maintain them. But that's not done when a person is in the middle of dying. I'll tell you an unbelievable story that I saw written by somebody called Rabbi Yaakov Goldstein, and he has an article, a very good article about this that you could look online about DNR. And he mentions a story with the Lubavitcher Rebbe that on the 27th of Adar, the Rebbe, 1992, the Rebbe received a debilitating stroke in the oil. 2 years later, 4 o'clock a.m., the Rebbe received a second severe stroke while at Manhattan Hospital, which at the time left the Rebbe with 98% brain damage. The doctors caring for the Rebbe explained the seriousness of the situation to the Rebbe's secretaries, who acted as his legal health proxies, and that they needed to consider signing a DNI consent form. He was 98% brain damage there was. The secretaries decided to send this halachic question to one of the world's leaders, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. So they sent the question to Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach with instructions that his name shouldn't be mentioned anonymously. So when Rabbi Shlomo Zalman was asked this consent order for the anonymous patient, he said that he says, listen, I can't answer these questions because I'm older already, and these are such heavy and important questions. I don't want to come to Shamayim having to give din v'cheshbon on questions that I shouldn't have answered at my advanced age. So the Rav who was asking him, this Shaliach, said he had no choice but to reveal to Rabbi Shlomo Zalman that we're talking about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and only he can answer the question. So Rabbi Shlomo Zalman replied the following: come back in an hour for an answer. After that hour, the renowned Paisik replied that every moment of the Rebbe's life is precious, and thus they are to do everything possible to keep him alive, even if it entails resuscitation. And this is unlike Rabbi Shlomo Zalman's approach. He writes that a lot of times, if he knew that the patient was dying, he would allow a DNR form. As a result of this psak, when the Rebbe later went into cardiac arrest at 7 o'clock a.m. Shabbos, the 2nd of Tammuz, they immediately began efforts of resuscitation, and indeed, after 50 minutes of CPR, the Rebbe's pulse miraculously returned and stabilized. The doctors have never seen anything like this before, that a pulse returned after 50 minutes. They were absolutely amazed and shocked that they saw a ghost, as from a medical perspective. This was literally a resurrection. That evening, 1 o'clock a.m., Motzei Shabbos, the Rebbe had a further cardiac arrest, and this time the resuscitation effort did not bear fruits. The stalkers of the Holy Tzaddik occurred on the special day of Gimel Tammuz. See, unbelievable that you could keep on resuscitating a person. Are you obligated to? No. If a person's dying, you're not obligated to. But to sign a DNR, which the hospitals want you to do because of quality of life, a person might have more pain. So we don't find in the Torah, this is a very heavy statement I'm about to make, but we don't find in the Torah that facilitating pain is a reason that a person could take away his life faster, or do actions that his life will be taken away faster. I'm not talking about euthanasia over here. I'm talking about taking away his life faster. I don't know if Rabbi Jason Wiener is going to speak about this in the next few minutes, but there is heavy pressure on the hospitals to encourage people to end their life quicker. Palliative care many times means that it's on the decline. So I'm going to get back to the question that I started with, which somebody asked me yesterday, which was what happens with this patient, this 92-year-old lady was a Holocaust survivor, and the family wanted her to get morphine to be more comfortable. Now, what does that mean, getting morphine? That's why you have to understand the terms that they're speaking to you. Giving morphine means is that they are switching from healing her to letting her die, which is Dr. Zagi called comfort care, letting her die in a comfortable manner, which means they would also remove antibiotics. They would also remove anything else that's going to help her get better. They want her to die peacefully without yisurin. Now, we want to make sure a person doesn't have yisurin, obviously, but in a case where we're basically mekatzer her life, that is not a simple situation at all. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman writes in one of his tshuvas that morphine is allowed to be given. This is a chiddush, but morphine is allowed to be given even though it's going to speed up the person's death, but that's not happening right away, and that's for the patient's yisurin. That's not a direct causation that's allowed. But even if morphine is able to be given, it has to be given at a low amount that is helping right now, but not direct causation that's going to cause her to decline rapidly right away, and not to remove any medications and antibiotics that are being given. And that indeed was the answer to the question, was that morphine could be given as long as you're not stopping all of the other medical care that woman is getting. And when this doctor went back to the patient's son and told him this, the patient's son actually thanked him and expressed his appreciation that until now he was only hearing about how they could get rid of his mother quicker. And this was the first approach that he got that actually to help take care of her in a way that is respectable but not hastening her death. And this is something that's very important to keep in mind. And I was telling Dr. Zagi yesterday that it's a new pshat in Bikur Cholim nowadays. Bikur Cholim used to mean that you're giving chizuk to the patient. It's not only that. If you are by the bedside, you are making sure that the hospital is not going to do measures that could, chas v'shalom, harm the patient. Hospitals do not like from Yidden because they know that they will advocate that the patient lives longer, and that's not necessarily to their best interest. The Agudas Yisrael claims that the way to deal with this is that you don't go head on with the doctors, you don't confront them, you communicate and you try to work together. Many doctors are very passionate and wonderful people, and you tell them the perspective you're coming from, and they have found much success with that. Instead of going into legal battles, which you won't have time for, you actually, it's called hishtadlus and shablonis, that you advocate and you have other people advocate for you, but you be by the patient's bedside and you show the hospital staff that you care. And if you show that you care, it's just like teachers, that if the parents show the teachers that they're involved with their children, the teachers will do a better job with their children. It's the same thing with patients and with whatever patients you have in the hospital from your beloved family. You show the hospital that you care, and they will reciprocate, and they will put more effort in making sure that a person could live longer.
I want to say three things to add in. When you have a DNR or DNI, patients don't know this, but usually doctors take it as like a softball approach with the patient. So they see a patient has DNR or DNI in the chart, they're not going to be as aggressive sometimes. Second thing is palliative care doctors, they hate Orthodox Jews because we're so against like a lot of their approaches. So it's like always going to be confronting you and sometimes a little aggressive. And with morphine, when morphine's ordered, sometimes a lot of hospitals order, but then it's given to the nurse to titrate up or down. Sometimes some nurses will titrate up and up and up and up on their own discretion. That can really expedite the patient's demise. So,
Questions?
Yeah, questions. I mean, I'm not a basic in this, so
We said no DNR, but with the difference from Shlomo, it sounded like you were saying was above and beyond. So what would they do from Shlomo that was not the standard that you would say?
But the Rebbe was in his last moments and he was dying, but they were keeping him. They were getting him back and back and back.
If you don't say no DNR, then that's what's going to happen, isn't it?
So certain cases, I would say, when a patient is terminally ill and they're on a decline, then that's when you ask a shaila. That's when you ask a shaila and you get a psak that a DNR or a DNI could. And remember what Dr. Zagi said. It's usually a carte blanche that they say, okay, that we don't have to worry so much about it.
Is there a not between a DNR and a DNI?
I don't know.
most of the time it's a combined thing. In the hospital, most times combined thing. Like you can't really do a resuscitation unless you intubate. So usually tell patients either you're combined or you're not at all.
Okay.
There's also something else that the nursing homes make the person sign, or hospices, DNH, which is do not hospitalize. That we usually never allow because we have to know the situation where they're in before we're able to pass such thing.